All right, folks, welcome back here. Basketball Saskatchewan Speaker Series, April of 2021, hosted and presented by Golden Ticket Sports. Here with my main guy, the one they call Philly J, Philly Fresh. Phil Jevtovic is here with us from Canada Basketball, performance and database manager for men's high performance. Has had an outstanding presentation that he did for us last year with Cross Canada Coaches Clinic, which I will drop into the comments as well, talking about shot selection and offensive trends at that time. Today, we're going to look at a little bit more here in terms of style of play. I'll put some information in the chat here for you on Phil, and we'll link that clinic actually as well. Okay, Phil, appreciate you doing this, man. You're always such a good dude here, and one of the guys that I really enjoy listening to for presentations. So I'll spotlight you, and then the floor is yours, my man.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Tanner. Thank you so much, Basketball Saskatchewan, as well, for the opportunity to speak today. So I will share my screen, at which point I will lose everybody in terms of the video or the comments and questions and stuff. So just let me know, Tanner, if anybody has anything, we can stop at any point.
Sure.
And go from there. All right. Awesome. Do you see the main PowerPoint there?
You bet. Yeah, it looks awesome.
Thank you. All right, great. So thanks again, Tanner. Thanks, Basketball Saskatchewan. Excited to speak today. So as discussed, we're going to be talking about style of play a little bit, specifically developing style of play and some ideas and thoughts about how we can analyze it and create a framework for reference moving forward. So before we start, just a brief background into myself. So as Tanner mentioned, I'm the performance analyst with the men's national team program and have been since 2016. And in that capacity, I work with all of our age groups from our earliest entry point into the podium pathway at grade 7, all the way through to the senior men's national team, and responsible for managing performance analysis, analytics, video, strategy, and everything under that umbrella. So it's really been an exciting ride over the last couple of years as we're hopefully pushing towards an Olympic qualification this summer. Otherwise, work with all of the age group national teams, as mentioned, and travel with the senior men's national team, working with the coaching staff in preparation for the competition. So a little bit of background there. What's really interesting about, Canada Basketball as compared to some other professional organizations and teams is that we really have access to athletes and work with athletes, as mentioned, from as early as grade 7 and all the way through that podium pathway to our senior men's national team. And this is an incredible opportunity to filter down the style of play that we have from a senior team level all the way through the age groups and see that development and the progression from all of those ages as they progress through the systems and really collect information and be able to provide an impact development over the course of those teams. So that'll be the background in some of the discussions that we'll have today. And what we'll be focusing on is I'll start with an introduction of the style of play, just to provide a lay of the land in terms of what we'll be talking about. Going to a little bit of video. Hopefully, I'll be sharing several video clips. I hope that the rendering works well there in the stream. Tanner, let me know if it's choppy. We can figure out an alternative. And then jumping into team analysis. So with an understanding of the style of play and the video context behind it, how can we use some of these tools to analyze our team performance? And then filtering in from a team level into an individual level. And I'll talk about a couple of things that we have in terms of shot selection rating and the international player profile as well. So with that, we'll start with the introduction of the style of play. I just really briefly wanted to share some of the characteristics of our style of play from a very high level. Focus on the offensive end here, so I won't be talking as much about defense, but framing the offensive style of play characteristics to be able to understand some of the strategic decisions we have in place, and then be able to talk about where they came from, how they came about, how we use some of the analytics and research that we do to create that setup. So what are some of the characteristics? Really important are three that I'll highlight here of the several, but pace is one that's crucial. Getting out in transition. You have a rim runner, you have your wing spacing and flattening out the corners, you have a trailer. Getting down to that 3-point line in 3 seconds and ensure everyone's running their lanes is a crucial component. We're talking about spacing and ball movement. So, quick decisions with the ball and often discussed as that 0.5 seconds, the swing, when you have a penetration, drive, kick, swing, and make sure the ball is moving. And then finally, the shot selection is of course a crucial component. And we're looking as always, obviously, for wide open threes and uncontested layups and getting to the free throw line are some of those key elements. So this is the context that we'll dig into. Just couldn't be a higher level outline of some of these elements, but hopefully an analysis now of and discussion of some of these in more detail will be valuable. So I like to start these with a discussion of our shot spectrum. Usually, again, just provide this graphic to give a lay of the land, what the most efficient areas are on the court. This isn't new information. This has been presented before. I'm sure everyone here has seen it, but effectively, so we're all on the same page, this is that shot spectrum that is sort of the backbone of some of the locations and sort of the efficiencies in the locations. So of course you have the free throw trip at 150 points per 100 shots, your rim 125, and then progressing at all the way down that hierarchy from corner threes and above the break to your paint. So that's just outside the restricted area, and then your non-paint too. So I mean, this is fairly consistent across basketball. It's a little bit lower in FIBA than you would imagine in the NBA. In terms of those efficiency numbers, that is due to a variety of reasons, whether it's the talent level, the athleticism, the rules that are in place. But this is what it looks like in best on best FIBA competitions. So for example, the Olympics in 2016 and the World Cup in 2019 in terms of that efficiency hierarchy. Now, of course, not all of these locations are created equal. So you might have specific shot types at these individual locations, whether that's off of the dribble, a pull-up, a floater, a runner, and the efficiency changes at each of those. So again, this is a lot of numbers coming up here on this chart, but really it's just to provide a lay of the land. Once again, in terms of what that hierarchy looks like. Of course, you're progressing all the way from a dunk, a free throw trip, and this is now points per shot, so no longer points per 100 shots, all the way through, and you might see some of those, the runner floaters, the hook shots as you progress through. So drilling in a little bit deeper, not just on the location of the shots, but the type of shots. And then the final element in this introduction, just to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of some of the discussion we'll be having today, is adding the context of the scoring action, because you might have a catch and shoot 3-point on the wing, but it might look a little bit different as a spot up compared to a transition attempt, and maybe a pick and pop. All of those have different contextual implications, and understanding what these contexts in terms of the scoring actions is another thing that we like to do to be able to all be on the same page here. So the 10 scoring actions we use are common, frequently seen, standardized analysis in video. And these are scoring actions that lead directly to an outcome. So, a shot attempt, a foul, a turnover, these are final scoring actions. So if you have, for example, a mid pick and roll and the ball gets swung and then into an isolation, we don't consider that mid pick and roll, only that final scoring action. So these are those 10 scoring actions here. I'm sure many are familiar with them, but as we progress through the scoring actions, you'll see we've bucketed them into 3 broad categories. First off is excellent shots, and those are the ones in the green. Great shots, the ones in the yellow, and then all the way through to good shots. So the distinction between those 3 buckets really is at the backbone of that shot spectrum that I discussed a little bit earlier. And it's, for example, in the green category, all of those scoring actions are resulting usually in shot attempts that are right around the rim or at the 3-point line. That's why the efficiency is generally a lot higher for those. You're gonna have a cut going right to the rim, around the basket. Generally that shot attempt is gonna be in and around that restricted area. Transition, you're looking to get, front rim, or maybe you have a wing flattened out for a 3-pointer. Open threes and rim runs is generally some of the shot attempts on average that you'll get in transition. Offensive rebound putbacks and a pick and roll man, it's either a roller to the front of the rim or a pop for a 3. So the variance, the spread of the possible outcomes in these green actions is a lot lower, a lot more narrow, rims and threes. As you progress down to the yellow, the great actions, you'll see spot up. You know, the way we define it, and it's commonly defined, is it's either a catch and shoot or you're attacking the closeout for a pull up, a runner. So the possible outcomes are a little bit wider. Same thing with coming off of screens, and then as you progress all the way down to the red, the good shots, you have, you know, pick and roll, the ball handler coming off the pick and roll, it can really be any type of shot, right? So that's what that looks like. And the terminology, excellent, great, good, all of these are shot attempts. That's why I'm not, you know, turning them as a bad shot, for example. It's still a possible point, that set of points that you're getting from this. So unlike a turnover or something like that, is why that terminology is used. And then very, very quickly, what this looks like on this chart, you have these bars here are how frequently these shot attempts happen. So 1 in 5, 20% for spot ups and pick and roll. And this line here is just the efficiency in terms of points per possession. So you can see just a graphical representation of that hierarchy on the previous slide. And because we have several age group coaches, I believe, and perhaps high school and younger ages, what does that look like at some of the age group levels? So you'll see here, the red bar is under 16, America's qualifier, and the senior men's national team level is the gray bar. So you can see that pick and roll is a lot lower, 50% lower, more than 50% lower at under 16, but transition is almost twice as high. And that makes sense. I mean, if you're coaching that level, you'll see a lot of transitions off of turnovers, missed shots, pushing pace. That happens at the age group, a lot of spot ups, a lot of putbacks. And as we get into U19 here, which is now the U19 is the red bar, pick and roll is still lower, transition has descended. This is now you're getting into, you know, college, young pro athletes and some late high school athletes. That's what it looks like here. Again, just setting the context, setting the table with the lay of the land, and before we get into some of the video and some of the other discussions. So I'm going to jump into game situations next. Are there any questions before I go in? Anything that's that anybody has before we progress into the next step here?
Sure, I'll throw in to you, Phil. Just working off of, as you said, the 16, the 19, then the men's national team. Have you found in your time with CB that there has been any changes in that, or has it been pretty consistent? I think one thing, especially on the provincial team side of things, right, is if you do provincial team for, you know, an extended period of time, you're seeing really the same thing of that U15 age group or that U17 age group, whether you've been in it for 5 years, 10 years, whatever it's going to be. Is it the same, I guess, at that 16, 19 men's national team level?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Tanner. I'd say it's fairly similar at U16. That's generally if you look at maybe the past couple of quadrennials, so that's, you know, that Olympic cycle, maybe for the past 4, 8, 12 years, it's been fairly similar. You're going to be seeing a lot of transition, a lot of putbacks, a lot of spot ups. Is going to be the majority of sort of the breakdown of the scoring actions. And then that progression into U19, it's fairly consistent. Where there has been a little bit of an interesting change, I discussed this a little bit in the presentation we had, Tanner, last year for the Cross Canada, is the increase in pick and roll usage over between the 2016 Olympics to the 2019 World Cup. There has been an increase in the volume of pick and roll actions used by gold medal profile international teams at the senior men's level. So that has been a trend that has increased a little bit, and invite everyone to check that out. But from the age group standpoint, generally it is fairly consistent, especially at U16.
Perfect. Thanks, Phil.
Awesome. So I wanted to show some of that in video to everybody, and what do these numbers really look like on the court in terms of stylistic things here. So let's just get to the video. Okay, perfect. Hopefully it's not too choppy, but this is from our under 19 World Cup in 2019. And so you see the attack coming here. And now we're talking about the style of play, and we're talking about ball movement. The ball handlers attacking the paint aggressively. And you can see all of these white jerseys collapsed, looking at him, really drawing in the defense. The first pass that comes out is actually, the pass is a little bit low, but this is probably a pretty good shot. Thomas Kennedy is a pretty good three-point shooter coming off of that first kick. But what we're really looking to emphasize is those uncontested three-point shots. And you can see he's already ready to swing the ball as we're going, commonly termed by many, that good to great extra pass to the wing for an open three-point shot. So that's one example of ball movement as we're looking to get that open three-point shot. Here's another one. Another pick and roll situation here. The ball handler here, Phil Scrubb, same thing, attacking the paint and drawing in the defense. In this instant, another really important area of creating advantages is that roller that's rolling right into the paint and drawing in the defense, which is resulting in great opportunities for us. So you can see, coming in. So not as much in this particular clip here, but it's really the ball handler that's creating the advantage. When the defense is collapsed, everyone's attention is on the ball. And again, that same thing, kick out happens. Trey Bell-Haynes ready to swing immediately from good to great, and a completely wide open three-point shot at the top for Aaron Best there. And then this example here is from our U16s in 2019. This particular one is on that style of play standpoint that we were talking about in transition and pace. So you can see off of the missed shot here by the Dominican Republic, we are sprinting the lanes. Everybody is out and going in those first 1.5 seconds off of either a miss or a turnover, sprinting the lanes. You can see wings here. We're going to fill this wing on the near side in a second. And rim runner is of importance as well. Look at that presence, Enoch, sprinting the middle of the floor, calling for the ball. It gets swung to the wing here. And again, good shot. This is one of the best three-point shooters at his age group right now in the world, to great into the corner for that open corner three-point shot, the third highest efficiency in our shot spectrum. So that's another example of that. And one more pace video from the senior men's national team here, off of a made basket, sprinting in transition. And one thing I just want to emphasize, I touched on it briefly, we're down the court. Look at the shot clock right here, 22 seconds, 21 seconds to that three-point line in 3. And then you have an open corner three-pointer right here. We're looking to get down the court as fast as possible. So shot spectrum behind some of these stylistic things that we're talking about, but also the context and the type of shots as well is important. Oh, and I got one more here, similar story, senior men's national team off of a turnover, sprinting lanes, attacking the paint, and then an open corner three-point shot. Brady is able to knock that one down. So that's from some of our age group teams and our senior men's national team. I wanted to share a little bit of how, when we take a step back and look at our youngest age group at the junior academy, so that's grades 7 and 8 here in Ontario, and there's many junior academies across the country as well. Junior academy is the earliest entryway into Canada basketball's podium pathway. It was started in 2012. And what we're really looking to do is replicate an environment, what it means to play for your national team, whether it's style of play, comportment, everything, what it means to be a member of the national team. And an example I wanted to share here is how we use some of this information that I shared earlier from the lay of the land in framing some of the drills and scoring some of the drills, try and replicate the development in some of those situations that we're talking about. And this next video is going to be from an advantage 3-on-2 drill. I'm sure many have run in the past, but what we did here is we changed the scoring up a little bit. So for example, a layup is worth 5 points, then you get, a three-pointer might be worth 3 points, and then all the way down to a mid-range pull-up, for example, being 0 points, but then that offensive player might get the ball back. And these young athletes really did a tremendous job of thinking through some of these outcomes, emphasizing the proper spacing and ball movement to be able to get those shot attempts that we're looking for. And again, at this particular age, it's not, of course, whether the ball gets into the basket and whether it's a make. It's really about the fundamentals and the proper spacing and the ball movement over the actual distance and the three-pointers being made, and it's really just the style of play that's being emphasized fundamentally here. So video from Junior Academy, and I'm just going to let it run and talk over. But again, advantage 3-on-2 transition drill. We don't have the runner coming back here in this version, but again, players coming, sprinting all the way out to the three-point line, the extra pass to be able to get the open shot, coming in transition. Same thing here. We have a rim run showing a target hand and finishing right at the basket. A dribble penetration here, spacing open to the corner. This probably or should have been a better decision from the ball handler instead of forcing it up, but the space was correct. And then same thing, ball gets swung around. Look at the spacing to be able to find that shot. And just rolling a few more here off of the drive. Kick, he ended up taking this. Probably a good to great swing would have been a point of emphasis on that last one. And just another driving kick here. So changing up the scoring of some of the drills in order to get some of these outcomes. And it was really fascinating seeing, this was in 2018-19 when the athletes came back in tryouts and in camp in 2019. It was remarkable, some of the style of play and spacing, the ball movement that we saw in there. So at this point, we've talked about some of those high-level style of play characteristics, talked a little bit about in a video, from a video standpoint, what that actually looks like on the court and some of the points of emphasis. What I wanted to share next is, with that understanding of the style of play and some of those characteristics, how we talk about analyzing some of that information, tracking and monitoring the progress in some of these areas, and really discussing building up some of a framework for evaluating that style of play from the ground up in terms of the numbers. So talking about how we can track some of those components. So this table that you see here is just an output of that shot spectrum that I showed at the beginning of the discussion. And you'll see again those six locations on the left-hand side over here, field goal percentage for us in a particular competition compared to that World Cup average, and then the distribution of field goal attempts over here. So the order of these shots is a little bit different from the shot spectrum hierarchy that was there. That's because this is in order of the volume number of points that we've scored in all of these particular areas. So we scored the most points, for example, in this competition at the rim and all the way down through. But this is a table that our team puts together, and it's something that we reference after every competition across age groups. And what's not included here is that we'll generally have targets that we're looking to achieve. And then you're comparing those numbers, both in terms of distribution of shot attempts and the outcomes in field goal percentage and points per shot to those targets. So the targets depend on our style of play and the goals that we set, but also on the team composition. So we have a general style of play that's at our Canada basketball style of play, but individual players, of course, are unique, and there's elements within that style of play, depending on what team composition you have in that specific moment, that would drive perhaps slight changes to that. So keeping in mind, of course, the individual characteristics of your team with that's general style of play in mind. So of course, this is the shot spectrum here. And one other thing we're looking at is not just the spectrum, but a particular scoring action. So same thing here, you have your 10 scoring actions, the distribution of possessions in both of these areas, and then the points per possession, as we discussed earlier. Simple high-level analysis. Again, for this, we'll also have targets, and we're looking to hit those in particular areas depending on the competition and the age group and all of that. So these two tables here is what we refer to as outcome statistics. This is a number. This is a final result that happens after the game, right, or after a particular possession. These are box score statistics. It's on the previous one, it's field goal percentage, right? So that's field goals made, field goals missed. And, this is the end result of the outcome of the possessions. But they don't tell us as much about how we actually get to drive these numbers, how we can improve them, how we can dig into the details to provide a little bit more information on the context and the process behind it. So scoring actions provide more context, obviously spot up transition and all of that. But what is really driving those outcomes is what I'd like to share and discuss in a little bit more detail next here. So we like to talk about it in terms of the difference between outcome stats and process stats as we're looking at that. So If, for example, you take something like effective field goal percentage, it's your field goal weighed by the fact that threes are worth more than twos. It's difficult. You can track effective field goal percentage after a competition or after a game, but it's difficult to take that information to your coach or to your players, for example, and be like, look, effective field goal percentage is important for us. We got effective field goal percentage better. This isn't good enough for true shooting, whatever the case may be. So for us, it's important to understand what is the process that drives the success in our efficiency, for example, in a metric such as effective field goal percentage. So you can identify actual style of play characteristics that we have that drive those outcomes that we're looking for. One other thing that's important to consider is small sample size outcomes. If I don't know if anyone's familiar with Kevin Pelton from ESPN, he's their sort of data analytics reporter and writer, and he has a bunch of great features. But he often at the start of the NBA season, they'll talk about small sample size theater, and that's it's been about a week or two of NBA basketball. You've seen certain performances, and how likely is it that those are going to be maintained versus regressing to the mean? In fact, FIBA competitions are essentially small sample size theater. You have games in a tournament, you're usually playing about 5 to 7, 8 games at max. And there's often, unique outcomes, outliers that happen because you're playing such a small number of games, and understanding, that might happen, and keeping in mind the broader research and strategy. If, for example, you played a particular game and you got the shot quality that you're looking for, but the shots just weren't falling. Is it necessary to change up something completely, or is it just that small sample size theater that we're talking about? And again, I touched on this a little bit before, the unique capabilities of individual players that will change. The previous discussion on shot spectrum and the scoring actions, of course, are just average numbers. And not talking much about defense in this discussion today, but you can see how all of these individual elements come together and inform how we now not only think about preparing to play on an offensive standpoint, but how we use this information to set up our defense as well. We understand what the areas are. We can set up our scout accordingly, depending on some of this analysis and identifying strengths and weaknesses of the opposing team. And then depending on our things that we like to do defensively and strengths and weaknesses defensively, how can we impact the other team there? So all of these different elements come together from a defensive standpoint. I won't touch on that as much today, but perhaps for a following subsequent presentation. So one example that I'd like to share now is paint threats. This can really be anything, anything that you've identified that drives efficient offense. So I'm just using paint threats. It's commonly used, but it's a random example. It can be anything really. It's just one way of tracking, one attempt of tracking perhaps what drives our efficient offense. So as we talked about before, uncontested layups, wide open threes are the target of what we're looking to do, shot spectrum and all of that, and getting to the free throw line, obviously, a crucial component of that. So we've talked about it, the outcome statistics, the game has been played, we've received the box score, we've looked at the video analysis, the final numbers. These are some of the ways we can look at our outcome stats. Shot spectrum, right? We talked about that a little bit before. That table that I showed, those show the particular outcomes in each shot location, scoring actions, effective field goal percentage, shooting, whatever the case may be. These are outcome metrics that allow us to assess how we did in a final terms from our style of play standpoint. But what are some ways that we can create a framework in order to be able to track the process that drives success in some of those outcome statistics? So one area I suggest here, and we can discuss this in more detail, and perhaps it's something that someone's already doing or might find valuable to try, is that example of paint threats. So applying pressure on the paint, the theory is will drive efficient outcomes for us offensively, because as we showed in the videos earlier, the defense is collapsing. You might have an advantage immediately to finish a layup, or because the defensive collapse, you can find a kick out to three-pointer or a better shot opportunity attacking closeouts. But there's many different ways to get this, not only with the ball getting into the paint with the dribble, but perhaps you might have a roller or a cutter or an offensive rebound. So just some examples of what that looks like. So obviously the simplest way to apply pressure on the paint is from the drive and penetration with the ball. So this particular one is a rejected screen, but the same thing is here, hard pressure, a hard attack into the paint, getting right to the rim, getting also an end one there, finishing at the free throw line. So the drive is one way to attack the paint and put pressure on the rim. Another way is with the roll man. We saw a video earlier. You have that roller right into the front of the rim. Defense is collapsing, pressure's put on the paint, and that's leading to kickouts and other outcomes from there. A post up is another way that you can put pressure on the paint and create a threat on the paint that can lead to good shot opportunity for us. So, what does that post up look like? This is from age group again, U16 in 2019, off of Horns here. A little bit of a slow roll, but the Enoch's looking to seal here, right in the middle of the paint, slow to react here, move the ball a little bit, but it gets into an area that's an advantage for us, and Enoch's able to take advantage there off of the seal. Another look from our senior men's national team. This is a mismatch opportunity that was identified here. This player, Walter Hodge, in the white jersey that's defending Aaron Best #1, is in foul trouble. He's not the strongest defender either, so we're looking to create an advantage in the paint with a mismatch and a direct feed here. And if Aaron didn't have that advantage to finish, wide open on the three-point line for opportunities. So many different ways, obviously, to apply pressure on the paint. We talked about pace earlier, transition rim runs, another video example here. This is off of a missed three-pointer. We're getting out and sprinting lanes in transition. Same thing, looking to beat that shot clock. We got a rim runner coming right down the middle here, sprinting the wings in transition, and flattening out ideally to the corners here. You have a runner attacking the paint, a quick drag, and defense collapse, pressure on the drive, and Owen's able to finish right at the basket. And then other ways, a cut is another way to create pressure on the rim. And drive those outcomes. This is one example from U16. Same thing against the US. Dribbling across the perimeter, a great setup here for a hard backdoor cut towards the basket. This cut and the fact that the ball was passed forces the defense to help and collapse. So we have an easy dump off there to Enoch, who's able to finish right at the rim. So many different ways to create pressure. Off screen is another one. If you're coming off of a curl, for example, and defense helps and collapses, you might have other opportunities off of that. And finally, obviously, an offensive rebound, whether you can put it right back up or a kick out for a quick shot or whatever you sort of have as a decision strategically to play out of that offensive rebound. So many different ways to put pressure on the paint. All of these are driving efficient outcomes for us in terms of that final number that, we're looking for those rim attempts, we're looking for 3-pointers, but if we're just looking at the final outcome of, okay, we made, 5 out of 10 threes out of the corner, or however higher effective field goal percentage was, or we scored, 1.5 points per possession in transition, it can be useful to examine the process behind all of those things. In this paint threat example, tracking the threats that contribute directly to efficient offense. This is just fabricated numbers here, not from a particular competition, but one way you could set it up, for example, is you identify all of these paint threats as rows in a table. You have all the possessions here. We drove the ball 64 times, scored 58 points. That's 0.9 points per possession, got to the free throw line 11 times. So these are all of those particular things that we're looking to evaluate from an outcome standpoint. But here we're drilling into, okay, what results in that? Whether it's roll, post up, what was the process behind that? One thing that we talked about too is that multiple paint threats. Is it the case that multiple paint threats might result to more efficient outcomes? So, maybe you have a drive, a kick out, and then you maybe set another ball screen, and you have a roller and then another kick out for a shot. That was an interesting analysis. You can find that you might actually get a little bit of diminishing returns as the higher you get in terms of multiple paint threats, because you're getting later into the shot clock, the clock's running down, and you're also by creating more actions also open to more turnovers as well. So there's that sweet spot in between, but that's a discussion for another time. And but really the purpose of this, the reason I'm sharing it here is hope that it's interesting in the sense that this is really anything that we can track. Paint threats is just an example, but anything we can track within our style of play to drive those efficient outcomes that we're looking to get. from a team standpoint. So other examples might be, whether it's rebounding, you're looking at particular zones on defensive or offensive rebounds, whether it's transition defense, are we stopping the ball? How many people are we sending to the offensive glass for a transition defense? So there's transition offense. We talked about some of those areas of the court you're looking to get to. So all of these are processes that drive the outcomes. They're grounded in an analysis of the strategic style of play that we're looking to get, and our lay of the land in terms of what it looks like from a FIBA best on best national team standpoint. So from the team evaluation, I would like to proceed along to an individual analysis and give you a little bit more info, not only from the team standpoint, but how we can drill down to individual players as well. Before I jump to that, just opening the floor. Not sure if there's any other questions or thoughts, if everything makes sense, and we can just jump right into the team analysis. Any questions at this time, Tanner, anything?
Nothing coming up here now, Phil, but I think, yeah, as we head into the individual, really nice segue. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, great. No worries. Let me know if anything comes up. So again, many different ways we can go from an individual standpoint here as we're drilling within just the team setting down to individual players. I'm going to share two with you today. So that's going to be the individual shot selection rating. I've talked about this a little bit in the past, and our individual player profile. So again, adding context to those numbers that we're discussing, and from the outcome standpoint, and what is it that drives that from the individual level here. So first off, the shot. Oh, by the way, just realized teammates now here in Australia and Canada, both the Raptors. So talking a little bit about shot selection rating, AB doesn't have anything to do particularly in this picture with shot selection rating, but I love this picture, so had to put it in there. One example of tracking that I'd like to present is this individual shot selection rating. These numbers over here are from that initial slide I showed when we go all the way from dunk all the way down to like runner, floater, or mid-range. So take this hypothetical situation where particular player X is going to take, let's say, 6 or 7 shots in a game. We're not interested here in necessarily whether that athlete makes or misses the shot, but what is the expected value of that shot attempt based on the location on the court and the type of shot that athlete is taking. So suppose the first shot is a layup. We know that the expected value of that is just under 1.2 points per shot. Next possession down the court, athlete gets to the free throw line, 2 shots, 1.5. Next down the court, athlete takes a runner, 0.9. Then we can go all the way through and we can create this hypothetical breakdown of a game, let's say, in which an athlete took 6 shots across a variety of different things, a 3-pointer and a final free throw chip here. The average expected value of all of these shots is roughly 7. So an average points per shot of 1.2 based on this shot quality that we were discussing earlier. Now we can add in an additional layer here. So what is the actual value? Did the athlete actually make or miss that shot attempt? So the layup, let's say they missed. Free throw trip, made 1 of 2 free throws. Runner, floater, missed that. Mid-range dribble jump shot, missed that, but we're able to make the 3 and then both free throws on the free throw trip there. So a total of 6 points, 1 point per shot. Obviously, this is only 6 attempts. You can extrapolate it over a training camp, a whole set of games, but it's clear that now we can start thinking about comparing this expected value based on the location and the type of shot to the actual value here to be able to identify certain gaps, strengths and weaknesses, areas for improvement. Was it just a luck gap? Athlete was taking shots that are good for them, but they just happened to miss them in this particular set of games? Or is it a skill gap? Perhaps the type of shots that the athlete is taking aren't really what they're best at. They need to continue developing that. What is the skill gap here that we're identifying? So able to compare and contrast some of that. As always, sample size is always a consideration. You're looking to get as broad a base of samples as you can, whether it's, like I said, training camp competitions. But what we like to do as well is not just when the athlete is in our environment, but also for the other competitions that the athlete plays on. For example, we're watching the high school video, tracking the high school video to be able to identify some of these things. Club, what does it look like when they're playing for their club team? What does it look like when they play for their college team? Whatever the case may be, all of these different contexts are a different opportunity to be able to evaluate some of these elements. and combine all of this information together to be able to provide for a coaching staff. So how is this being used? Team assessment, for example. So like I talked about, what is the difference in shot selection between these certain contexts? What does it look like at the individual player level? So we've also found in the analysis there isn't actually that big of a difference between what an athlete is doing in camp with us and then at age group specifically when they're in competition with us as well. So it's important to be able to look at all those numbers. But what was most interesting specifically from some of this work is our age group findings that we had from here. So one example that we have is guards are often a lot more consistent in their actual performance compared to their expected performance. So that previous chart we had an average of 1.2 points per shot. The actual in competition, the actual outcome, the amount that they missed of each of those shots, the efficiency is actually very close to what you would expect them to score based on where and the type of shot they're taking. However, big men, so forwards and taller players, especially in age group, are often scoring at a much lower rate than their expected points per shot would suggest. But what's interesting is that they often have among the highest expected shot selection rating on the team, which makes sense. Generally in age group, your big is running in transition, right around the basket, perhaps rolling, offensive rebounds. Those are, if we remember that hierarchy of scoring actions, generally going to be those green, excellent shots. So you'd expect the value of those points per shot to be a lot higher in expectation. However, the gap is that they have among the lowest actual scoring rate, particularly in age groups. So a larger difference, which again, is logical. It usually takes big men several years. They're lagging behind their guard counterparts at the same age in terms of development, whether that's both physically, skill level, they're getting used to their bodies, they're taller. So that's the gap that is interesting. So it can often be frustrating, perhaps if a coach, the athlete's missing easy layups, but through development, through a continued emphasis and ensuring that the athlete gets those touches and those opportunities, even though they might be missing it early on, this expected value is tremendous and will pay dividends when that athlete becomes in their early 20s and at the level, whether it's in college, pro, FIBA, when they finally catch up to the guards that are mature a lot earlier, it's really drastic, the impact that they have. And it's important to continue to emphasize this as age group. So there is a skill development gap for bigs in age group. They're generally as many as 5 years behind their counterparts, and they don't really level out until their early to mid 20s. But in FIBA, I presented on this last year at the Canada Coaches Clinic. If you look at the 2019 World Cup, gold medal, Marc Gasol; silver medal, Argentina, Luis Scola; bronze medal, France, Rudy Gobert. The most important players on their team are their bigs, driving efficient outcomes for those teams. Crucial to be able to identify this and develop it. So again, always providing my disclaimers here a little bit, but small sample size as always, don't need to talk about that much anymore. Expected efficiencies, all those numbers are averages. Individual skill level of the athletes, as we always discuss, will come into play here. It doesn't take into account the level, the location of the defender and the contest level. These numbers don't take that into account. With NBA data, it's you can do that with your second spectrum data and the coordinate tracking. You can find that fairly simply. Here with FIBA, these particular numbers that I'm sharing don't keep that into account, so important to consider. And it also doesn't take into account the position of these athletes here. So that previous chart where I showed, a hypothetical player X is taking 6 shots, you have your 1.2 points per possession, all that. Perhaps you feel, this is a little bit too intensive. I don't have those numbers for my age group. Whatever the case may be, obviously there's many other methods to be able to do this that might be more feasible or interesting for you to consider if you're tracking this in your own context. Again, something that I'm sure many are already doing. Many coaches have done in our environment in the past, and something that we've tried with various teams is setting up a simple scale, a rating scale of every possession from a 0 to 5 basis, and looking at the individual and team totals from here. So for example, suppose you set, a free throw trip is worth 5 points. A rim attempt is worth 4 points. an open shot in range is worth 3 points, all the way down to a turnover is worth 0 points. And then you're tracking that over time, both individual and team totals, to be able to establish both in live games and in your competitions that you're playing, levels that you're familiar with. You can pass this along to your players and communicate it. Really at the forefront, this is both combining that understanding of the shot spectrum. You're looking at rim, you're looking at free throw trips, but also keeping into account the individual strengths of your own players, and the fact that, you know, those numbers are averages, but, you know, individual athletes might have unbelievable ability in a specific area that on average might not be as efficient. So that's another example, another method that you can use for analysis, terminology that you can keep consistent, and speak about this when you're discussing performance with coaches post game. A much more simple scale than what we discussed earlier in terms of that shot selection rating. And then finally, I just wanted to share as well what that looks like, drawing back the curtain at some of our age group camps here, just a little bit of a look at how that looks for us at some of our training camps, of course, pre-COVID here, and what we do. So you'll see in this picture, in training camp, when our athletes are there, we're tracking the box score statistics, the scoring action, some of these outcomes. We have a video output here for us as well, where the analyst is able to, in real time, get access to the video clips as they're coming in, watch possessions that have already happened to ensure quality control across some of the data that we're entering. You know, some coaches like shooting ladders, for example, whether it's 3-point shooting, free throws, whatever the case may be, building out some of that tracking. Again, a very common stat that many have tracked: whiteboard stats, hustle stats, charges, wins, whatever the case may be. Many people have different preferences here. And then the process stats that we discussed earlier, and the live video is fantastic. That allows you to kind of go back and assess, make sure that you have all of the numbers correctly tracked. All of this information is entered into our high performance database and is quickly turned around for coaches. One of the most important things, this is a little bit of a sidebar here to style of play, but from a performance analysis analytics standpoint, it's crucial to be able to deliver information in as quick a turnaround as possible while the information is still fresh for the coaching staff. So what we'd like to do is ensure that, you know, if there's a set of scrimmages that happens in a camp, for example, and then the coaches will say, okay, that's it for today. Players will go cool down. The coaches will meet on the court. As that meeting is happening, we ensure that we're delivering information and numbers based on the certain things that we're tracking into the hands of the coaches, so they can have some objective information. If, for example, they were focused on a specific basket or whatever the drill or whatever the case may be, a specific team during the course of that competition. So putting all of this together into our athlete profiles that inform our selection process by providing objective feedback, and then strengths and areas for growth. So an example of that was the individual shot selection rating that I talked a little bit about earlier. You know, where are the gaps? Where are certain elements? Where can we feed this in? This goes into individual performance plans that our athletes have access to, which identify the analysis based on some of these metrics that we're tracking, but also expert feedback and recommendations from our coaching staff. As I talked a little bit earlier, one training camp is certainly not enough time to be able to provide all of this. So we're looking at data from high school, club, AAU to help coaches make all of these decisions. Whatever provincial team, whatever context the athletes are playing in, we're trying to collect that video to understand as much about the background as we can. And of course, also inform team performance by doing this as well. So all of this comes together in our individual performance plans. And the backbone of this remains the shot spectrum information, the individual types of shots, whether it's a pull-up, runner, floater, and then the context of the scoring actions is all really important here. And it's distilled into what we refer to as the international player profile. This is a public document. It's shared on Game Plan is for everybody to access. I'm sure many have seen it before. It is going to be updated after the Olympics this year, but this is, again, the fundamental breakdown of what players look like, the actions that they're involved in across the positions at an individual level for us. So an objective athlete assessment tool, but really also a consistent framework for analysis. This was one of the first things that I was tasked with doing when I started at Canada Basketball in 2016 was we had an international player profile, but it was based on qualitative assessment from our technical director and high performance coaches. But we were looking to inform that qualitative evaluation of what it looks like at each position with numbers and objective analysis to support those expert observations and identify in a clear and consistent way using a video to provide feedback and characteristics to evaluate players and at each position. So one thing I will say, it produces simple and clear diagrams, which like I mentioned, are grounded in video analysis and are easily replicable and incorporate what our expert coaches are providing as feedback. So one thing I'll say as well here is, unlike some other Olympic sports, for example, swimming, track, it's a little bit more straightforward to measure the impact an individual player can have or athlete can have. For example, a specific time at a specific age group, they need to be at a certain level as they progress through their careers. A lot more difficult in basketball when it's not timed, simple measurements to really understand what the impact of the individual athlete is in basketball, especially with young athletes at age group. So an important consideration to keep in mind as we go through this. So what we look to do with the the international player profile is understand and evaluate and identify what drives performance at each position, incorporating, like I talked about, the context of the shots, the type of shots, and the frequency, the distribution of those shot attempts and the scoring actions. So what we did was identify in our international player profile at each of the 5 positions, what are the 5 scoring actions that drive effective performance at the gold medal profile level. So it's a group of athletes that's consistently medaling at best on best competitions at the Olympics and at the World Cup at each of the 5 positions we're using here to evaluate. So here's an example of that diagram. What you see here is those 5 scoring actions. Together, they encompass roughly 75% of what, in this example here, a small forward, a gold medal profile small forward is doing on the offensive end in terms of final scoring actions. You have transition, post up, spot up, pick and roll, ball handle, isolation. And what these individual points are points per possession at each of these particular scoring actions. So the further out you are from center, the more efficient in points per possession that athlete is. We're also layering in the distribution of shots, like we discussed earlier. So here, just under 1/3 of gold medal profile small forward scoring actions are spot ups, so roughly 30%. And then you have here, post up, transition, isolation, pick and roll, encompassing that profile for the particular athlete. So what we can do then with this framework of reference is to be able to identify what our athletes look like in the individual context, whether that's, again, provincial team, club, national team, and look how that changes between contexts. What are the areas of improvement? What are the strengths of each of those particular individuals? And one other thing is that this black line is just an average line, right? So you're going to see that there's no player that exactly fits all of these perfectly, but it's an average understanding what drives the efficiency in terms of scoring actions at the small forward position. So this is a dashboard that we have in our system for a sample athlete here that compares their performance on the court in a particular situation, environment, against that gold medal profile average at the particular position. So here you see that black line is the same as from the previous. It's the bucket of average gold medal profile athletes. And the red line is this specific athlete here, sample athlete in question, at a particular competition, their efficiency in terms of points per possession. So you can see they're right on gold medal profile average in the spot up. They exceed it significantly in transition and isolation. It seems that they haven't scored here in off screen at all. 0 usage in off screen, 0 shots attempted here, and a little bit lower in pick and roll ball handler efficiency. So you can get an overall indication of the efficiency. You can drop down the league in order to be able to see, okay, what do they look like at provincial level, national team level, club? It'll change depending on the context and the style of play. And this gray line here, the only purpose is to provide a frame of reference for what's the max, what's the most any player at the gold medal profile level is at in this terms of this gray line here. But what's really important for the age group level, especially U16 through U19, is that athletes are never just siloed into these specific point guard through center, 5 actions, that's it. They can often contribute in many different ways beyond these 5 scoring actions on the court. So we, of course, track all 10 of those scoring actions. And then by selecting a position here, you can compare how that changes for the particular athlete in question. And maybe, are they the size, the anthropometrics of a gold medal profile point guard? Are they trending as a point guard if they're going to be a senior national team player? But currently their scoring profile is like a center. Well, what is the gap there? What's the individual unique characteristics? How can we address some of those? And of course, expert opinions from our coaching staff in terms of comments and style of play considerations here in the notes tab. So to wrap up here, how do we use this information? These are individual performance plans, team selection, preparation for training camp and assessment camps. Our coaches receive this information months in advance of the training camp, and they're referencing it as they're going in to camp, because they only might get 4 days with athletes before selection decisions have to be made. So to ensure that we can provide as much as we can to the coaches. Scouting information, of course, we have this framework. We don't only do it for our own players, but also going into competition to prepare for opponents who might play. And then team level assessment is certainly another consideration. So this is something that we've been building up over the years. A crucial component to how we evaluate and assess athletes and player development within the men's high performance program. It's grounded in our understanding and analysis of style of play, both international basketball, FIBA, best on best competitions, but also the Canadian national team style of play, and provides a framework for us to be able to build out and work on player development and national team assessment moving forward. So that's that in terms of content that I have to share here. I hope that was interesting and relevant, and might have provided some food for thought, regardless of the context that you're coaching in, whether it's provincial team, age group, high school, club, middle school, whatever the case may be. Again, thank you to Basketball Saskatchewan for the opportunity to speak today, and Tanner at the team at Golden Ticket, always great. Thank you so much for inviting me, and you have my Twitter there if you want to connect. My email is also on the Canada Basketball website if you have any questions you'd like to discuss further. But before we call it, I would love to hear if you have any thoughts, any questions, any feedback based on some of the material that was shared today.
Awesome, Phil. Thanks so much, man. Really, really, again, appreciate you taking the time, and as always, the depth in which you cover here. You've given us a lot in an hour, man. I appreciate that. The first one that I have for you, at that youth age range, the 13, 14, 15-year-old, the coach who gets 1 practice a week, right? I'm sure you get this kind of question often. What is something they can do like tomorrow to impact their style of play based on what you've talked about today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on sort of the area that we're looking, and whether we're looking at team level or we're looking at individual level. There are many different things that you can emphasize. I think it also changed depending on the group of athletes that you have, and what you're looking to drive in terms of the level that they're competing at. So, for example, whether it's scoring drills in order to tweak some of those the scoring of the drills to get some of those outcomes. If you want really to focus on rim attempts, for example, or whatever the case may be, tweaking the scoring a little bit to be able to drive that. Also identifying certain outcomes to be able to figure out what process within your philosophy as a coach do you want to drive. So if it's something like, paint threats that we talked about earlier in the presentation, well, you're not just going to, bully ball Rhino into the paint and force up shots. There also has to be an element of decision making built into that now. So when a help defender comes, what is the decision that's being made? Whether it's a kick out, a drive kick swing, quick decision, 0.5. So all of these are elements, I think, as we're talking about both individual athlete development and a team style of play that go hand in hand, depending on the age group and the level that the players are at.
Perfect. Next up here from the attendees, with your assessment of your players in the younger age groups, do you modify your tracking based on what you spoke on today?
That's a great question. Certainly. So one thing that I emphasized when I was showing the video from the junior academy, when we had that transition drill with the advantage 3-on-2, and I touched on it there, is that you're not really at the younger age group, junior academy and a little bit older, looking at, you know, the outcome of those particular, you know, whether it's a make or a miss, and what is the breakdown in terms of efficiency and points per possession, and that's not something that's being considered at that young age group. Excuse me. A lot more important there is really the fundamentals behind spacing, decision making, ball movement, the positioning of the athletes, and their understanding of the concepts that are looking to emphasize. So there's certain things we do to track some of those decision making things, anthropometrics, physical development as well. But with those younger age groups, referencing the question, we won't be building out, you know, these intricate you know, efficiency profiles to say, okay, well, the athlete's only scoring 0.7 points per possession in transition when they're 12 years old. That doesn't really make sense. So it's as they get older and you know, as they push towards U19, where some of these individual tracking measures, such as individual shot selection rating and an international player profile, come into play from a quantifying standpoint. But that doesn't mean we're not considering the international player profile when we're working on the development of those young age groups. It's just the specifics of what's being tracked in terms of numbers looks a little bit different depending on the age that we're at.
Awesome, Phil, man, appreciate it as always. Best of luck here grinding out school to finish, and then, as you said, getting into the last chance qualifier and everything that is going on here in the world. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Definitely. No, thanks so much, Tanner. Thank you, Basketball Saskatchewan. It's been fantastic. I hope, you know, in the relatively near future, we can get over there to Saskatchewan and see everybody in person. But in any case, in the meantime, you have my contact information. At any point, please feel free to reach out if any questions arise. You know, feedback. This is some stuff that we're doing, but this isn't the be all end all. I'd love to hear what you think. Is there anything you'd like to see maybe done a little bit differently, or some ideas that you'd have? Please let me know of everything, and hope everybody stays safe and healthy, and look forward to speaking soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.
You bet.